Little by little, God was calling me already. So I turned my head again back to the 1 o'clock to where I'm looking, and the next shot I heard ripped through my throat. So I'm on the ground, my light's pouring out, and I hear this. John, get up or your wife is gonna die. It was easier to stay on the ground rather than get up and be resilient. I hear it again. John, get up or your wife is gonna die.
The only guy that stepped up and did not step back and extended his hand instead of covering his mouth with it was Robbie Reisner. He walked up and took my hand. Well, this hand, as you can see, it's crooked. It won't straighten out. It's hooked. When I shook his hand, those fingers are curled up in there. And he surprised him. He pulled his hand back and I thought, oh, God, I've embarrassed a great hero. And he thought, oh, God, I've embarrassed a poor soul. And he reached for my hand after I jerked it back. Then I realized he's reaching. He thought, oh, no, I've embarrassed. So he pulled his hand back as I was reaching for his. So we were seesawing there for a second. And then he grabbed my hand with both of his hands. He looked up and he said, Vietnam? I said, yes, sir. He said, son, I'm sorry. Well, that embarrassed me. He pitied me. I don't like pity. The problem with pity, it turns to self-pity. Self-pity turns to laziness. Laziness turns to death. I didn't want anything to do with it. I jerked my hand back and said, I didn't come here to get your pity, Colonel. I came here to thank you, sir, for what you did. Thank you.
Well, friends, welcome back to another episode of a Life Transformed Podcast. I'm John Arroyo. We are now on session 3 with American hero, my brother, my mentor, Dave Roever. But you have to make sure that you go back to session 1. This is the 3rd session. 1, 2, 3. You got to get 1. You got to go back to 2 to understand 3. Dave has left us with so much that you don't. They're wells. Like he is literally pouring wells, and you're going to have to go in there and you're going to have to get in the middle of it. Friends, we invited Dave because the generation of generals, the Jimmy Swaggarts, the Pat Robertsons, those men are now passing their batons. And so what are we learning from that generation? What are we learning from the Billy Grahams? You know, Dave Roever spent 9 years with Dr. Billy Graham. As a matter of fact, that's where he really learned the evangelism side. And you know, I love hearing stories about Billy Graham, but he was just, you know, Dave would just talk about how Billy Graham was just so gracious to the people. Always went and talked to Miss Brenda before he shook Dave's hand, because that's the man of Billy Graham. But friends, we have in the studio today for the final session, and this may not be the only time we're with Dave. He's welcome back whenever he wants to come back. But there's so much inside of him, like the Billy Grahams. If you had an opportunity to sit with Billy Graham, what would you want to ask him? Well, first of all, he's not Jesus, so we don't make these people into Jesus. That's not what I'm saying. But the Lord has entrusted them to be pioneers and to be generals of the faith. And so as we're growing, as we're advancing, as we're doing the work and service of the ministry, now we want to extract from these generals before they fully pass the baton and step in face to face with Jesus, because we want to finish well, just like them. So welcome back to a Life Transformed Podcast. My brother, my mentor, my boss, Dave Roever.
Thank you, Johnny.
So, man, you shared so much with us. But now, I just want to get right into the middle of it. You told us about Rosie. That's where we kind of concluded. You talked to us about the woman that stuck her hand into 440,000 volts of Holy Spirit, and your tears returned. But there was something that happened, and I believe it started at a meeting with Robinson Reisner when he returned back from the Hanoi Hilton.
It was my first time out of the hospital, and This is 1971. I was under home care. I'd been in the hospital for 14 months, 13 surgeries in 14 months, and then 50 more surgeries since. And I wanted to go to what was called the General Council. It was a gathering of ministers with the denomination of the Assemblies of God, and they had about 30,000, 15,000 or so pastors, and then their spouses. Not all of them brought their spouses, but then they also brought what were called delegates from their church, and they would make procedures and whatever, the business of the church. But at night they had these giant rallies, 30,000 people. I wanted to go. I'd been in the hospital. I'd been in Vietnam. I'd been in training. Now I'm at home recovering. I had one eye, one ear, and one nostril. This whole side of my face has been blown off. It's all artificial, plastic ear. Just for the record, it comes off sometimes when I'm speaking. Came off in Jamaica. I stuck it back on. Everybody thought it was a miracle, and they all got saved that night. But here I am. I want to go hear all these incredible speakers. I mean, world-renowned speakers. And having had the call of God in my life since I was a little boy, and fulfilled it with my license to preach, which I got in Vietnam in the mail from, it sounded like from Sears Roebuck, but from the denomination, sent me my papers. I'd applied before I was ever joined the military because I was in Bible college. And it came through. So now I'm credentialed. I'm out of the hospital, and I want to get my feet back on me and do what I've always wanted to do. Even in the hospital, last 8 weeks in the hospital, I was sneaking out and going and preaching. I was written up 8 times AWOL. Every one of those AWOLs were canceled, so I was released with a honorable discharge. But I'd go out and speak, and it scared people to death. I had one eye, one ear, one nostril, all pink. So now I still have one eye, one ear, and one nostril, and I'm out of the hospital, and I can go without being written up AWOL. And my dad loaned me $1,200. We drove 600 miles, and I went to this meeting. There were probably at that moment when I got there, probably around 20,000 people. The balcony was in. So I went up in the balcony to the back row in the middle, as far away as you can get from anybody coming around you. Middle, you had to come down both ends, get to me, so I knew I was safe up here. I don't want anybody looking at me. I was so self-conscious. One-eyed, one-eared, flying purple people eater. And I'm sitting there with my little sweet wife. She's sitting on my right. And the crowd kept getting bigger. Speakers were wonderful. The crowd kept getting bigger. More speakers, more crowd getting bigger. Pretty soon, they're in the row, 4 rows in front of me, then 3 rows and 2 rows. Then the row in front of me is filled up. I'm getting real antsy and nervous. And I know I was struggling with post-traumatic stress. I just didn't know what it was called. And pretty soon they start coming in. Well, the back row, they come all the way up against Brenda on my right and against me on my left. And I didn't want anybody touching me. I didn't want anybody looking at me. It was darker up there. And I was totally lost in self-awareness, horrible self-awareness. But I was still trying to focus on these speakers. And they said, the last speaker spoke, and that sounds funny. Last speaker spoke. And the MC got up and he said, now today we have an unannounced final speaker. He's not on the program, and we want him to introduce himself. I looked over, and from stage left, walking out across that stage, comes a colonel, full dress uniform, sharp. But as he walked, I said to Brenda, I said, baby, look at that man. He's in pain. She said, how do you know? I said, he walks like I walk, where every step hurt. He jarred the body. He took the podium. I noticed how he held it. He wasn't standing behind it. He was holding on to it. My name is Robinson Reisner. I'm a colonel in the United States Air Force. I've just been released from the Hanoi Hilton, which was legally known, or actually known as the Wallow Prison, Hanoi. I was there for 7 years, 4.5 years in solitary. They beat me with a lead pipe. He still had knots on his head. They slipped razor blades under the prison door so I could commit suicide. They tied ropes around my shoulders, pulled them together behind my back, put a stick in the ropes, and twisted until they burst my chest open. I heard men screaming in pain, and I would pray, but when I prayed, they stopped screaming. When I stopped praying, they started screaming. Then I realized it was me praying, and it was me screaming. My wife was tugging on my coat, and I realized I'm standing. I'm standing on the back row of the balcony, and 30,000 people sitting in front of me, and I'm the only guy standing, except for the guy at the podium. And my wife said, "Baby, why are you standing?" And I'm thinking, why am I standing? Well, I answered, I said, there's an officer on deck. You got to stand when there's an officer on deck. I knew she wouldn't understand. She said, "What?" I said, "Baby, he's a national treasure. He's a hero. I can't sit in the presence of a hero." Jesus stood at the right hand of God while Stephen was being stoned. A hero was giving his life, and Jesus stood for him. Who am I to sit in the presence of Robbie Rosner? She didn't know what to say. She said, "Baby, sit down. Baby, sit down. Don't embarrass yourself." I said, "I'm going to go down and meet him." She said, "What?" I said, "I'm going to go down and meet him." She said, "You don't do that, baby. You'll embarrass yourself. Don't do it." I said, "I have to." She knew better. She knew that day that radio alarm clicked, and I said, "I will not come back a civilian." She knew, don't argue with me. When I set my mind to do it, I'll do it. She said, "You can't get through this crowd. There's 30,000 people here." I said, "A man with one eye, one ear, and one nostril can get through this crowd." And I was right. When I started down through, they departed hither and thither. Man, I felt like Moses, "My people." I started, I heard them. I could hear them say, "Ooh, Alice, look at that." They thought I was deaf too, I guess. "Alice, look at that." I remember that. Never have forgotten it. I got down, the stage was as high as the ceiling of this studio. How did they get up there? On each side of the stage was blue curtains, a sea of blue curtains, portioned off in little cubicles for different things. And I said, "Well, there's got to be a way up." So I plunged into the sea of blue curtains. I wandered through and came out the backside, and sure enough, there was a set of stairs going up to the platform. There was a rope that hung there. It was a big felt rope with golden hooks on golden ends, hanging on golden stands, and a little plaque that said, "None shall pass." Actually, it said, "Do not enter," but it's more dramatic. I thought, I've come 600 miles, 1,200 miles, spent $600. I've been shot at. I've been shot. I've been blown up by a hand grenade. I've been burned. I've been listed as killed in action twice. And this little rope's going to tell me I can't go up those steps? I don't think so. So I just unhooked the little rope and said, "One shall pass." I went up those steps, and two guys met me, and they had badges on that said, "Staff." I tapped one of them on the badge. I said, "I'm sorry about your infection." He thought that was funny, and he high-fived his buddy, and when they were high-fiving, I shot right past them. Walked up. This time it wasn't blue curtains. It was a giant, thick red curtain. I parted it. I stepped out in front of 30,000 people. Those speakers that were so amazing to me covered their mouths, stepped back, and said, "What in the world?" One of them said, "Jesus." I said, "What, are you cursing?" I heard Jesus as a child, but I heard a lot more in the Navy. Not the way I heard it as a child. And I didn't know if he was cussing or... The only guy that stepped up and did not step back and extended his hand instead of covering his mouth with it was Robbie Rosner. He walked up and took my hand. Well, this hand, as you can see, it's crooked. It won't straighten out. It's hooked. When I shook his hand, those fingers are curled up in there. And he surprised him. He pulled his hand back. And I thought, oh, God, I've embarrassed a great hero. And he thought, oh, God, I've embarrassed a poor soul. And he reached for my hand after I jerked it back. Then I realized he's reaching. He thought, oh, no, I've embarrassed him. So he pulled his hand back as I was reaching for his. So we were seesawing there for a second. And then he grabbed my hand with both of his hands. He looked up and he said, Vietnam? I said, yes, sir. He said, son, I'm sorry. Well, that embarrassed me. He pitied me. I don't like pity. The problem with pity, it turns to self-pity. Self-pity turns to laziness. Laziness turns to death. I didn't want anything to do with it. I jerked my hand back and said, I didn't come here to get your pity, Colonel. I came here to thank you, sir, for what you did. Thank you. He gently reached over and took my hand. With a Messiah complex, he started tugging on my fingers, trying to get them to straighten out, and they wouldn't. They've never straightened out again. He said, young man, when you suffered for America, don't you love her so much more? Oh, God, yes. Yes. I said, yes, sir. Indeed, sir, I do love her so much more. That night, through suffering, we became best friends. We traveled the world together with the Rapid Deployment Force of the United States Army all over the world. He spoke on surviving as a prisoner of war. I spoke on surviving battlefield trauma. Why were we so bonded together? Through suffering. Jesus said, if you don't eat my flesh and drink my blood, you don't have any part with me. He's not talking about cannibalism. He's talking about suffering. He's talking about being willing to die for what you believe in. And in fact, he did die for what he believed in. He believed in me and he died for me. That day, Robbie Reisner, till the day he died, became one of my best advisors, one of my best friends. We spent hours, days, weeks, even months together, having the time of our life, laughing our way all the way back to a normal life, if you want to call it that. I miss him to this day.
There was something about that meeting that you and Brenda, as you left that conference, something sparked inside of you about returning back to Vietnam.
Yes, it did. Actually, that moment was the beginning of a total change of trajectory of my life. I would become the man and more of the man that I ever dreamed I could be. Not saying that self-complimentary or self-aggrandizing. I'm just saying I never dreamed I'd get to do the things I'm doing today, and I'm going to get to that. But I went to hear a guy named Bernard Johnson. Probably your listeners have never heard of him. One of the greatest orators I've ever heard in my life. He was out of Brazil as a U.S. missionary to Brazil and brought the greatest revival in history of that nation. Brought it to that nation. And he was speaking, and I was sitting there at the Will Rogers Auditorium in Fort Worth, Texas. This was in 1971. 72. And he got through speaking, and I felt this voice, not in my head, I don't hear voices, but it was a voice of an idea. An idea. Go back to Vietnam. Finish what you started. Go back. Well, finish what I started. I went as a machine gunner. M16? No. So, on my way home from there with my wife, and you got to remember, she's turned ripe old age of 20. I said, baby, there's something I got to tell you. She said, you're going back to Vietnam, aren't you? I said, oh, God, don't you ever let me spring something on her every now and then. I was really upset with God because he told her before I could. And she said, what do we need to do to make it happen? She was 100% on board. I said, well, first of all, I got to get the money. I don't have the money to even buy a ticket to go to Vietnam. In 1973 and 1974 and 75, that country was very, very heavily communist. To this day, it's still communist. I said, well, I don't know, but I said, we're going to get the money together. 1974, I went back to Vietnam. I was there in 74 and 75. It fell. 1973, the U.S. troops pulled out. 74 and 75, the Vietnamese army, called ARVN, Army of the Republic of Vietnam, were losing the battle. The North, with the Chinese help and Russia's help, and the U.S. pulled out, the first of an Afghanistan debacle. And I was there in 75 when it started collapsing. I got out with my life. I lost all my video. I had to secretly, I'm not going to tell you how I did it, but I got all my video out through Cambodia. But I couldn't, I left my ear in Vietnam during the war, but I left my heart there in 75. 1992, I said, I got to go back. I don't care what it takes, I got to go back. 1974 and 75, the communists were taking the country. Everywhere was dangerous. 1992, 93, 94, 95, 96, communists owned it now. They weren't just there to be a threat, they owned it. I went back. I'll never forget the looks I got from those customs guys in 1992 looking at me. We missed you the first time, but we're going to get you this time. I went back, and instead of an M16, I went back with a John 3:16. I got back and started sharing Christ with people. 74 and 75 was the beginning. From 1993, everything changed. 1975, I was speaking in a school that had been hit by a J-dam, I guess, some kind of weapon from the U.S. It was pretty rattled, the building was. I spoke in this room full, probably 500 kids there. In the back, or in the crowd, was a 15-year-old boy named Tien Dan Dang. Did I say it right? He's 15 years, he's sitting over here. And he heard me when I said, I came with an M16, but I've returned with a John 3:16. He knew what I meant. He said to his dad, I'm going to follow in Mr. Roever's footsteps. His dad laughed and said, what are you going to do, get in these suitcase? Well, when the communists took it in 75 and I ran for my life, they ran for their lives because they were marked for execution, his whole family. They were boat people, 27 days on the high seas. Ran out of food, ran out of water. People were dying. They were going to have to resort now to cannibalism. And just before that horrible act of self-survival would take place, a U.S. ship from the United States Navy out of Guam pulled up and found them. He says one of the greatest experiences of his life was looking up and seeing that United States of America flag. They immigrated to the U.S. from Guam or the Philippines. And what was it, Philippines? Philippines. The ship was from Guam, but they ended up in the Philippines and immigrated to Omaha, Nebraska. I'm going to make it very short so we don't run out of time here, but he had to learn English. He had to go to school, learn English. He graduated with a master's in business, and headhunters from the big corporation were looking for the best of the best. And Tandy Corporation came along and said, we want him, Dan Dang. Tandy Corporation was headquartered in Fort Worth, Texas, where my headquarters was. They put him over all the Radio Shacks. He was there 16 years. 16 years. Became a big muckety-muck. Way at the top. He probably would have ended up CEO of all of it. Probably should have, and they wouldn't have gone bankrupt. Because he's brilliant. They put him in the Radio Shack to do an inventory and a review of the Radio Shack on the property I owned. He's in a Radio Shack on my property in Fort Worth, Texas, and I go over to get a piece of wire for a transmission, to move a TV monitor in front of me because we had Teen Satellite Network broadcasting to 6 million students for 1 hour every week on Teen Satellite Network, all over America, in every public school almost in the country. I needed a piece of wire that long. I go over to get it. I walk in, and there's Dan Dang standing there, and he says, "You're Dave Roever." I said, "Yes, who are you?" "I'm Daniel Dang." I said, "You're Dan Dang." "So?" "I was in Da Nang when you spoke at the school." I said, "You were there?" "I told my father, I'll follow your footstep." I said, "You did a good job, because look out the window. Right there's my office." He didn't know I was there. I didn't know he was there. But whenever you speak, watch out, it's going to come to pass. I will follow in Mr. Roever's footsteps. He ended up 50 feet from 50 yards from my front door. That night, we met with all of his friends and formed Mission Vietnam. That today, we have 200,000 plus students in our online university in Vietnam, 480,000 students, more than that, I'm giving you conservative numbers, worldwide in 44 countries and a dozen languages, and growing every day. Every day. The devil had me down, had his foot in my throat, but he didn't finish what he started, because God had a plan for my life. And I'm here today because God did not let a little 5-year-old boy's prayer go unanswered, did not let the tick of a clock destroy me, but it made me. I'm here today because God had a plan for my life, just like yours, John. One of the most difficult things I ever did in my life was the day I let you go and you walked out of my house to advance on a curriculum that God had for your life, to establish you in John Royal Ministries, to do a podcast, A Life Transformed, to be the man of God you are, to do what you do. You're one of the greatest visionaries I've ever had the joy to mentor. I've never wasted a minute of my time on you. I love you, John.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for that. I'm honored to be able to have served you. And I still serve you.
Yes, you do.
I still serve you. Okay.
We serve together.
So we only just have a few minutes as we're concluding your time with us, your visit with us. Dave, you have been used by the Lord to speak to millions, to mentor kneecap to kneecap, one-on-one. The Lord has raised up through you many evangelists, female and male. You've been side by side by U.S. presidents. You've been all over the world. How do we finish well, Dave?
There's several things that really come into play here. It's a good way to finish this podcast. First of all, SEAL Team 6 has a little motto they have among themselves. If you're worried about dying, you've already lost. You've lost the battle. You've lost everything. You cannot serve, pardon me, to the extent and the commitment they serve at without being willing to pay the ultimate price. So if you're going to serve God, serve him with all your heart, not part of your heart. Number 2, keep it humble. Don't think you're the answer. Jesus is the answer. Number 3, you don't have to one up everybody. It's so I get it. I get kind of tickled whenever somebody asks me what happened to you. I'll tell them a little story or something. Then they got to tell me a story of something bigger, something better. You can say, "Well, I've got a picture here. I'll show you." Then they got to show me their picture. Always got to one up everything you are. Give people room to be famous. If it's nothing more than in their own eyes, make them famous. Don't worry about yourself. Always give other people credit. Another thing, the ultimate, it's called accountability. Some people wouldn't know this if I didn't tell them, but I've traveled for decades, 48 years in my own Learjet. Not because the church bought it. Churches never knew I had one. I never asked them to even buy fuel for me. They'd give me a round-trip airfare on a airline. I put that airfare money into fuel. but I never, it's the same as if they flew me in, but I'd fly my own jet. 48 years. My children were born in the back, were trained, were homeschooled in the back of an airplane. They were homeschooled, airplane schooled. My wife and I decided we would teach the kids herself. I was the principal. They don't have to do anything bad. So, accountability. Whenever I would get to where I was going, I'd give my pilots a key to my room. If my wife wasn't with me, they got a key to my room. Here's the rule. You don't knock. You put the key in, you open that door. Anytime, day or night, if I'm in that room, nothing's going to be happening in that room that is not before God righteous. Nothing. My dad taught me, don't even show up on the front porch of a woman that's alone in her home. Billy Graham taught me, never be seen alone with a woman other than your wife or your own daughter. I worked for Billy Graham 9 years, but we shared board members for almost 20 years until they all passed from age. They were all older than me. I was trained by the best of the best. The secrets I've learned are, if you make yourself just be you, sit at the tail of the table and let somebody move you to the head, but don't sit at the head of the table and move you to the tail. If you're not worried about how you look to other people, and in my case, it's not going to work anyway. If I did worry, it wouldn't help. Just be what God made you to be. And there's no competition. Why would we compete in the family of God? What is there competing? We're all going the same. It's like first class and the back row of the airplane all get there at the same time. So it doesn't matter if you're great or small. We're going to, in people's eyes, we're all going to get there as long as we're on that airplane. Amen.
Dave, thank you so much for your time. We just scratched the surface. There's so many more stories. There's so much. But you're going to be starting a podcast, and we look forward to that. And so how do people get a hold of you today? Is it Roever Found?
Well,
DaveRoever.org?
Dave Roever, DaveRoever.org. Or here's what you can easily find me at, helpavet.com. Doesn't matter, lowercase, uppercase. Helpavet.com. You can remember that. Come on. You're driving, but you know you can remember Help a Vet. You don't have to write it down. Helpavet.com. And that will take you to everything we do. It shows you all three corporations, our evangelistic association, 501c3 religious, our foundation, 501c3 non-religious. Our foundation works with public schools. I've addressed over 8 million students and quit counting over 4 years ago and still address. I just spoke to 12,000 at one time at the Tulsa Civic Center in Tulsa, Oklahoma, just the other day. 12,000 kids at one time. That's a hoot. I've done 60,000 at a time at Lucas Stadium where the Colts play in Indianapolis. 60,000 kids at one time. FFA, the greatest youth organization in all the public school system. You can get a hold of me, helpavet.com. You'll see all the things we do, what we do overseas in Vietnam and 43 other countries. Come see me, helpavet.com. I've got a book out right now called Forged in Fire, and it tells Dan Dang's story in it. It's got how my wife and I, it's a great story. I think they'll love the book.
We'll definitely have that shared. We'll show it. We'll have the team will pull it up, pull in all your information. Dave, how do people support you? What do you need support in?
Well, our biggest thing right now, we just gave a $25,100 gift to the survivors of the flood in Kerrville, Texas, which is where my ranch is. Our ranch is there, built for Department of Defense to send our worst wounded to. You've been there many times. Mm-hmm. And we lost our roads there, a lot of damage to the whole area. But if you support us, we do things like support those flood victims. I just bought 33 body armor units for the fire department for their trucks in Pueblo, Colorado, where they had a shooting the other day. 3 cops were shot. The firemen went in behind the police department to get their bodies, although they lived, but to extract their wounded bodies. But they'll never be the same, shot in the head. The police went in full body armor. The fire department went in with T-shirts. When I found out, I said, never again. I bought 33 sets. They cost $84,000 for 33 sets of body armor. I immediately got 50% of it covered by the manufacturer. They said, we'll help you, Dave. So I've been raising money for the rest of it. And then what we do in Vietnam, what I do there is constantly in need of financial support. But the thing closest to my heart is now our work is called Operation Warrior Reconnect. And we are a 501c3 foundation that people can give to. It's non-religious, but we transform military lives. We've got a big session coming up here in just a few weeks. We do marriage recovery and individual recovery from post-traumatic stress disorder. And Vietnam veterans, we do a special program for you. All you got to do is go to helpavet.com, register, and we pay for round-trip airfare. Now listen carefully. We pay for round-trip airfare. You will not, if you come with $1, you go home with $1. We'll train you, feed you, house you at no cost. You've already given an arm and a leg. We're going to make the difference up for you.
Dave, awesome. And I'm going to have Dan Dang on back in the future. And Dan, this is official invite to come on, and we want to hear about all the work that's going on in Vietnam.
Wait till you hear from Dan. It'll blow your ever-loving mind.
We want to hear about the schools in Vietnam. We want to hear about the Hmong story, how the Hmong book came, the Bible that you guys partnered with Jimmy Swaggart
200,000 Bibles going to the Hmong people.
Wow. All right. Well, friends, you heard it. Again, we just scratched the surface. You heard from a man of God. You heard from an American hero, and you heard from a man who has taken the gospel all over the world and advanced the kingdom in the United States and around the world. Friends, tell your friends about this episode. Let them know about helpavet.com, what Dave Roever's doing. Go to Reap International as well. Look and see what Dave is doing through Reap International. Look and see what Dave is doing through helpavet.com. Connect. Get connected with what Dave is doing and help our veterans, help our soldiers, and let's spread the gospel all over the world. Friends, I'm John Arroyo, and we conclude with American hero, Dave Roever. See you on the next episode. Bye-bye.